Peanuts, created, written, and illustrated by Charles Schulz, is perhaps the most notable entry in the entire medium of comic strips, being beloved for its mass appeal to children and adults. Starring children and a dog, featuring slapstick for the kids and pseudo-philosophical satirical commentary for the adults. It was arguably a pioneer in slice-of-life media. While Charlie Brown may be damaged but wise for a child, and Snoopy always has a subplot doing something undoggy-like, most conflicts still involve day-to-day activities, which was a new concept at the time. Prior to the comic strip's widespread syndication, it premiered in 1947 in Schultz's local press company, St. Paul Pioneer Press, under the name Lil Folks, in which many of the staple characters or their precursors would appear. Afterward, the United Feature Syndicate agreed with Schultz to widely distribute the strip. But the name Little Folks had already been taken. Little Folks, created by Tack Knight, lasting from 1930 to 1933, creating an issue of Lil Folks not being distinguishable enough, even though Little Folks was retired and had faded into obscurity at that point. So a new title had to be created, to Schultz's distaste. The name taking inspiration from a children's program debuting in 1947, The Howdy Doody Show, a Western-themed educational series featuring Buffalo Bob Smith and his marionette Howdy Doody, featuring a live child audience and Western marionette sketches. If this looks familiar, it's because Woody's Roundup from Toy Story 2 and just Sheriff Woody in general is a homage to this genre of post-World War II children's Western programs. Howdy Doody himself easily being the face of the obscure and dead genre. One of the segments in the later episodes of the show was called The Peanut Gallery, featuring live interviews from some of the children in the live studio audience. The children are referred to as Peanuts. Without Schultz favoring, this element would be borrowed for the retitling of Lil Folks. Howdy Doody has been declared as a public domain IP since 1998, since no trademarks had been filed since 1948 then. So before it was legally public domain, the UFS never faced any legal trouble. Schultz disliked the title for the rest of his life, but thankfully the names of the protagonists, Charlie Brown and Snoopy, would become synonymous with the IP in general. So if you've ever just called it Snoopy or Charlie Brown, don't feel bad because the creator didn't call it by its legal name either. Peanuts itself, widely syndicated, would premiere in 1950 to continuing success. Throughout the 50s, refining the signature look of the characters and establishing much of the secondary cast. The characters would first appear in animation in 1960 as a recurring animated segment on The Ford Show, hosted by Tennessee Ernie Ford. You know, the 16 tons, and what do you get, that guy? Similar to how The Simpsons began of shorts on a talk show. And by 1965, it had cemented its significance and began the viable potential elsewhere. It began its long line of adaptations, some of which are easier to find than others, so to prepare to see some 420p TV recordings.
A little bit like everyone, we all need reassurance that some people really do like us. But I guess Charlie Brown is mostly me. That's why he often has that dumb expression on his face. But, for example, when I've been beaten in a golf tournament or a bridge game, or maybe if I bowled a bad game on a particular night when I feel low, this is when I come home.
The first adaptation being a 1965 television special, A Charlie Brown Christmas. Notice how the franchise legal name is not in the title. Schultz himself would write the adaptation and would not use the name for the franchise recognition, when adapting the source material utilizing actual children in the casting. Having a Christmas special, the primary conflict involving Charlie Brown's dissatisfaction of the realization of the mainstream commercialism of the holiday as opposed to giving love much like Christ did on this date. Choosing this direction over any other generic holiday plot, there's, oh no, this person hates Christmas. Oh no, Christmas is ruined. Oh yay, Christmas is saved conveniently. Thanks, Santa Claus, who canonically exists in this universe. Christmas arguably becoming less of a Christian festival celebrating the birth of Christ after a point, and this Christ Mass special actually involves Christ, the lack of building a conflict.
Night, and lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them.
Something that most child-friendly specials don't do because of the presentation of a religious bias, which is far less marketable, hence to why most religious media is not mainstream. This might have actually been the first Christmas special to question authority about the mass commercialism of the holiday. And the mass commercialism may be common sense now, but this was the 60s, so that might have actually questioned some authority in households, contributing to the post-World War II postmodern idea that everything kinda sucks. Charlie Brown learning to not be upset with the lack of Christ and mass commercialism, and accepting that there's not much he can do, but he himself can still participate in the holiday in good non-capitalistic taste.
Oh well, this commercial dog is not going to ruin my Christmas.
The special was produced under a short period of 6 months, airing on December 9th, 1965, the runtime being cut down for half an hour rather than a full. The half-hour production even being over budget. I imagine there's an alternate timeline where they had an extra half hour, we would have seen the play that the special hypes up. But the simple ending of Charlie Brown learns that there's nothing he can do is actually far more satisfactory than a good or bad play. So that budget reduction actually helped the narrative. And I got licked on the lips by a hyper-bully mutt once, and for the record, it is disgusting. Director Bill Banderas believed the production was a disaster beyond necessary funding. Adapting the signature art style of the comic would be integral to any animated adaptation due to its simplicity and distinguishability. But unknowingly, adapting simple material was a benefit for its shoestring budget constraints. The animation being formatted in the same angles that the characters are confined to, bettering the illusion of a moving comic. Minimalism in both animation and actual storytelling being one of the greatest strengths of the special. The special would be sponsored by the Coca-Cola Company, the first of many Coca-Cola sponsorships, and animated promotional segments would be commissioned. Although, with subsequent reruns, the sponsorship segments would not appear, and some of which have been lost to time. This would include an alternate cut of the opening number, Christmas Time Is Here, where Snoopy launches Linus into a Coke sign. That's why they're both seen near Snoopy, but only Charlie Brown is launched. And a simple message brought to you by the conclusion hymn, Hark the Angels Sing. The soundtrack of the special itself would become renowned for having elements of both jazz and traditional choir music. The track Linus and Lucy would essentially become a franchise jingle, even if only designed for those two characters in a single scenario, but does often appear in scenes of sibling quarrels involving the title characters. The jazz pianist groups would be composed by jazz pianist group the Vince Gualdry Trio and producer Lee Medelson, who would also work as a lyricist for some of the vocal songs that weren't public domain hymns. The score itself would become a series of iconic jingles and hymn covers, and by 2012, the Library of Congress would consider the soundtrack as a part of a, quote, culturally, historically, or aesthetically important piece of an American sound recording. The soundtrack definitely being one of its most crucial factors to its street cred in pop culture as one of the greatest pieces of Christmas media ever. And although that acclaim wasn't immediate, it was still a success and performed even better the next Christmas season, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Secure enough for greenlighting 2 more specials to release the next year in 1966, the first being Charlie Brown's All-Stars. Being a follow-up, much of the crew would return and would retain many structural similarities, being a TV special about playing baseball. The special would prioritize Charlie Brown's insecurities as he develops a poor reputation on the baseball team, trying to become more professional and overcome his poor reputation and allowing his friends to have more fun, fearing his presence may diminish the experience. Similar to the previous, the main event actually playing in a league is not shown. The rest of the team realizing the harmful nature of their mistreatment and the lack of maliciousness in Charlie Brown's poor performance.
Why are you looking at me like that?
They made your uniform out of my blanket!
While it is more cliche as a baseball episode, it does manage to dodge a lot of sports plot garbage. It's not like anything is actually accomplished, as the point of the special is to explore insecurities rather than drama over the course of going to the big league. For a second installment, it is definitely not as beloved or remembered as its predecessor. This one also had a Coca-Cola sponsorship removed in future airings, which only black and white recordings have surfaced of since, featuring one brief segment with an appropriate sign and an entire Coca-Cola baseball-themed commercial halfway through.
No matter whether you're a great player or just a great watcher.
Things go better with Coca-Cola. Things go better.
But premiering 5 months later, another well-recognized special would premiere, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. While it does definitely feature more actual holiday celebration, the actual conflict of the Great Pumpkin actually adds a lot more character. There was also more work in the strip adaptational department of the adaptation, with the direct comic adaptations as well as including the Snoopy Flying Ace, which first appeared in 1965, and the Lucy Kick the Football gag from 1952. This is also where Snoopy first started to receive his absurd what the dog doing subplots. Linus believing in the Great Pumpkin, who has some similarities to Santa Claus, who wasn't a part of the Christmas special and is ridiculed for his different belief. Building a plot around the stupid myths you hear on the school bus, giving focus to Linus, this instance taking advantage of the established running gag of Sally's crush on the disinterested Linus, as well as his more childish attributes in a world where kids are a bit smarter, he included. The lack of resolution of an actual great pumpkin or some illusion that makes Linus believe it dodges a lot of the cliche crap too.
I thought little girls always believed everything that was told to them. I thought little girls were innocent and trusting. Welcome to the 20th century.
It's just charmful to see kids be kids without anything deep. Being the third, I think the team realized that there didn't need to be any commentary or analysis for a plot to still work. Given its seasonal replay value, this one is probably the second most known behind the Christmas. Once again, Coca-Cola sponsorships, as well as the now liquidated Dolly Madison Bakery in an alternate cut of the credits of Linus being upset, and a removed shot of a Coca-Cola scarecrow in the pumpkin patch. The next special, You're in Love, Charlie Brown's title may imply that it's a Valentine's special, but it might have been conceived out of that, but it came out in the summer and not 3 months after Halloween. The plot marks the animated debut of multiple characters as well, including the Anonymous, the little red-haired girl, expanding on a gag from 1961, and Peppermint Patty, the less favorable mousy blonde-haired tomboy who was introduced in 1966, not to be confused with Lucy's friend Patty. Peppermint Patty living in a different side of town, a setting that would later be altered with some adaptations, but would surprisingly stake a consistent piece of continuity for a fat minute. And the anonymous teacher character, Miss Othmar. Charlie Brown being distressed that he's not in the little red-haired girl's presence, being a complete opposite to his sister Sally when she's around Linus. Charlie Brown begins to prioritize the red-haired girl over himself and faces embarrassment throughout. The entire plot basically being a series of continuital sketches as a result of his refusal to admit affection. A subversion of the generic love interest plot focusing on Charlie Brown only from the red-haired girl remaining anonymous. A story about love rather than a love story.
Yes, ma'am? What am I doing? I don't have the slightest idea.
Another great example of incorporating stylistic decisions to dodge cliche crap. A Coca-Cola sponsorship is rumored to exist for this one, but has yet to resurface. But by 1968, Snoopy had clearly become the most marketable character, so it was only inevitable that he'd get a focus special. His focus special being He's Your Dog, Charlie Brown. So Snoopy is an epic prankster gangster, and everybody gets tired of his trolling, so he has to go back to the puppy mill where he was adopted from and disobeys the instruction, and starts living with Peppermint Patty, expanding on her reintroduction, and also marking the animated debut and one of the few talking appearances of Roy. Patty realizing why nobody likes the funny kid with the big nose.
He never says a word, just signals for service.
Snoopy forces himself to change to comply to Patty's orders because he doesn't want to be on a leash, but eventually runs away back to Charlie Brown's neighborhood, not really learning anything in the end, but just being the same stupid beagle he always was. It's the first true instance of over-relying on Snoopy's shenanigans since he's a dog and he's silly, and there's only so much you can do with being a silly dog. Once again, a Coca-Cola sponsorship is rumored to exist for this one, but we got nothing. The next being it was a short summer Charlie Brown, obviously being set over the summer. The story taking place in the past tense, Charlie Brown having a negative bias and Lucy holding a positive bias. With Lucy forcefully signing the boys up for a summer camp, the boys aren't interested because they're boys and they ain't going to no fruity-ass sleepaway camp. Boys being boys and boys being girls. Also featuring a camp counselor, which is the first of few instances in which adults or teenagers can be seen, unless you count the Beethoven bust. And even if the boys only win once, it doesn't magically make the experience good, which is a logical and funny consistency.
Camp, everyone! There's to be no discussion and no need to thank me.
I feel like I've been drafted.
Just being down to earth that summer camp sucked ass throughout being its greatest advantage. Penultimately, a Coca-Cola sponsorship is rumored to exist for this one. But given the consistent success of the specials, why not go bigger, leading to the first theatrical movie, A Boy Named Charlie Brown, releasing in 1969. And being a widely released animated feature in the late 60s is an accomplishment in of itself. By 69, there's no DreamWorks or Illumination, etc. And other cartoon characters were popular, but Disney sort of had a monopoly on mainstream animated features, since animation was more expensive and viewed as for children at a time. So all the most iconic non-Disney characters of the time weren't stars of mainstream animated features. Plenty of iconic shorts and television shows and whatnot, but not widespread theatrical movies. Like, we're just getting the first ever Looney Tunes fully animated feature in the year 2024. You know, even though these these characters are like 90-ish years old each. Probably because Disney held a monopoly for like half the 20th century. Hanna-Barbera was definitely the big dog of television animation then. But by 1969, Hanna-Barbera only had 2 theatrical animated features, Hey There, Yogi Bear and A Man Called Flintstone, both of which barely have any box office and budget information available online, so I'm going to assume they weren't big hits. So even if you were a big name in TV, you couldn't hold a candle to Disney on the movies. And allegedly, the first Peanuts movie, A Boy Named Charlie Brown, was praised as an instance of breaking the Disney monopoly, making about 12 times its budget in '69 money, and that success was deserved. The film expands on multiple pre-existing concepts, but adds way more depth. The same substance that made Charlie Brown Christmas beloved, being a journey of Charlie Brown's attempts to regain his self-confidence as we see his day-to-day activities, participating in a spelling bee that he believes is a gold ticket, and it actually being satisfactory when he acquires the status of champion. A spelling bee is a pretty CLICHECRAP concept, and like that's not even fun to watch in real life, but here it's actually investing from that niche slice of life beauty. Also referencing the source material / previous special elements like the baseball team, a Snoopy, all on a theatrical budget, adding way more pizzazz to the shot composition. The cutoff between characters being another fun stylistic decision to take advantage of a widespread aspect ratio, and the fact that it's based on a comic strip, further helping the moving comic illusion. Also, stylistic decisions like altering coloring are brief but more calm experimental segments throughout the film. Reminds me of George Dunning Stan Breakage, and that's a good thing, a true product of '69. The incorporation of paintings as backgrounds on specific instances does add a lot of depth to when Charlie Brown leaves his Midwestern hometown. Charlie Brown not winning for convenience for a happy ending, but concluding with honesty for optimism and satisfaction. From only partial victory being better than the nothing he saw once within himself. Nobody really caring and being in denial over Charlie Brown's own expectations.
But did you notice something, Charlie Brown? What's that? The world didn't come to an end.
Representing a true change of mind. Nothing to be upset about, no grand finale, just beginning another day. The film's storytelling is not a loss of identity, a common occurrence when adapting television-designed characters. Just studying the characters and not placing them in a conceptually illogical scenario where there would be more things and events for the characters to do to find questionable. It's not trying to be epic, nobody's getting kicked in the balls. The scale is incorporated sparingly. Typically a movie that feels like an extended episode is a bad thing because, it's not movie-ish, but it's the more thought-out emotional substance that truly makes it enjoyable. Multiple original vocal songs would be produced for the film, but not excluding Vince Gualdry's signature scores. There are 2 versions of the soundtrack release, one of which including the score, original vocal songs, original musical numbers, and dialogue tracks in a separate release of simply just the score. The Everything version is a rare collector's item due to minimum manufacturing from licensing issues at release, but those issues got resolved eventually and the holders got real stingy and reprinted only about 1,000 copies, making what became a holy grail of Peanuts merch even more shiny. The physical release of the score is not valuable. The number I before E except after C is a creative explanation of real-world functions of the English language that doesn't come off as absolutely randomly educational, but is a good random with its scheme, which would probably not be the case if it came out 40 years later, like the Pickle and Peanut theme song or whatever. It's like that, but good. The film being a hit, allowing the franchise to continue. Play It Again, Charlie Brown would be the first TV special in over a year and a half, given that the team had been busy on the theatrical movie. This one gives more focus to Schroeder of all characters. Schroeder is a recognizable character for his piano playing gags, but I don't think he's like a household name, unlike much of the cast up to this point. And Charlie Brown does in fact play once, although lots of promotional material does not feature Schroeder, taking advantage of the running gag of Lucy's interest in Schroeder, mainly his recognizable career and vacation potential. Lucy being the one who needs 5-cent theatrical help here. But it could have actually allowed development for Lucy to accept that Schroeder is disinterested and prioritize that conflict, but not much happens. It's just a series of sketches of Schroeder being disinterested, definitely inferior to You're in Love, Charlie Brown, which allowed way more than Schroeder only cares about music and not Lucy.
Ugh! I've been kissed by a girl! Ugh! I've been poisoned!
Get some iodine! Get some hot water!
There isn't even really a resolution either, acceptance or disinterest, which could have been a resolution, but the attempts just don't work out, and then it ends. It's like they made an entire special on the basis of one running gag. Ludwig van Beethoven's music being public domain is so heavily utilized throughout that he's credited as a primary artist on the soundtrack. This is also the end of the alleged Coca-Cola sponsorships. This one's also yet to resurface. A missing Coke to go with the nothing burger of a special. Probably because the team was working on the second Peanuts feature film releasing in 1972, Snoopy Come Home. Except for Vince Gualdry, this being the only Peanuts production of his lifetime that he was not involved in. Of course, after this film, he would resume his role on television. Schultz taking influence from Disney, feeling that a Disney-like tone would be appropriate for the character of Snoopy, and wanting to create a greater distinguishability between the feature films and television specials. Instead, the music was done by the Sherman Brothers, who you may know as the Mary Poppins guys. And there's still some jazz and piano to go around. This one has a more of an emphasis on original vocal songs, one of the featured vocalists being Thurl Ravenscroft, the singer of You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, which inspired You're a Mean One, Mr. Piplup. The film would also mark the animated debut of Woodstock. Yes, it took us this long to get one of the most recognizable characters. Woodstock would debut in 1967, but other birds debuted as early as 1950, in the very beginning, but Snoopy and this one specific bird weren't friends yet. The plot of the film would loosely adapt a comic strip storyline from 1967. Given that Snoopy, an inaudible dog, is the protagonist, the film would have a heavier emphasis on sound effects, which are incorporated throughout, because what else is he supposed to do?
No dogs allowed.
The plot involves Snoopy unexpectedly leaving town to go visit his original owner, Lila. His motivation being unknown to his owner since he cannot speak. But he's a dog and he can't just get a lift, so shenanigans across the country ensue, mainly in places where dogs aren't permitted to walk. Snoopy eventually being conflicted as to who he should live with. The film also dedicated time to Peppermint Patty's interest in Chuck, the first true time in the animated chronology that gets a focus more than a line or two. An adult clown is also seen. Some of the stylistic decisions of the previous do return, but definitely not used as sparingly. This also marks the animated debut of Franklin, whose comic debut was in 1978, but he'd yet to speak in animation, who at the moment was controversial from the presence of diversity influenced by the assassination of MLK Jr., but that would escalate later.
Pay me $1,275, please. Schroeder, how about a beep on the nose? A what? Beep. A beep on the nose is a sign of great affection. I'd rather have the $1,275, please.
The film is sort of like an improved version of He's Your Dog, Charlie Brown, and for a What the Dog Doing movie, it could have been a lot worse, although not as good as the previous. The film was well received, but only made 20% of its $1.1 million budget back, which could be attributed to Cinema Center Films, the main production company, had already begun to cease operations, Snoopy being the final Cinema Center film. However, this failure wouldn't kill the franchise or its attempts at feature-length narratives, so back to the TV special it went, with another sort of holiday special, airing 9 days before the 1972 United States presidential election of Richard Nixon versus George McGovern. The special loosely adapting a comic storyline from 1964. Here, utilizing the typical student body president plot, this special would also introduce the Joe Cool alter ego, one of the most marketable gags. Vince Gualdry himself would sing the Joe Cool theme song, something he typically wouldn't do with his Peanuts involvement, being a vocalist. Charlie Brown is not even running as a candidate, so the special is technically true without spoiling the ending. Linus being the main candidate who only receives a positive reception because of Lucy's threats, running against an exclusive one-off character named Russell Anderson. The tragic flaw in Linus's campaign being that he believes in the Great Pumpkin, a fun joke with a logical consistency.
I decided to say a few words about the Great Pumpkin.
Linus eventually gets elected, but learns that he cannot do anything as a student body president. A funny parallel given the student government doesn't really mean shit. But the special is overall brought down by the lack of competition conflict. Linus's rivalry barely gets any screen time. If anything, it should have been one of the main squad members, making the rest of the cast conflicted. It just could have been better. But also with the sort of holiday specials continuing, with There's No Time for Love, Charlie Brown, the main conflict expanding on Peppermint Patty's interest in Chuck, being the first instance of that being a main plot conflict.
Sir, I just heard that we have to go on a field trip. I'm scared to death of field trips.
This would also mark the animated debut of Marcy, who debuted in the comic strip 3 years earlier, and Franklin's first speaking role.
I'm going to do mine on the various kinds of metals in the earth, and how each has affected the progress of mankind. Maybe I'll do one on stomach aches.
The special also building off continuity of Peppermint Patty attending a different school and getting to see more of her day-to-day life. The comic still being produced simultaneously, the specials always borrowing recent additions and elements. Vince Gowaldry would also reprise his role as the Joe Cool song vocalist. Charlie Brown's academic performance is declining, featuring some satire of the redundancy of the American education systems.
Well, I think that the purpose of going to school is to get good grades. So then you can go on to high school, where the purpose is to study hard so you can get good grades so you can go to college. And the purpose of going to college is so you can get good grades.
You figured it was about Charlie Brown and trying to overcome his social life and school life, but not really either. Mainly due to the limited runtime of Peppermint Patty and Marcy's interactions, which sort of starts a love triangle. It's largely in focus despite an expansion of continuity. But the next special, A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, is the one I am easily the most nostalgic for whatever reason. I feel like I saw this one way more growing up. It is a holiday special, so it's got the annual replay value, and what else is there to watch on Thanksgiving? Free birds? I remember relating to the joke of the dissatisfactory meal of cereal, toast, jelly beans, popcorn, etc.
A pretzel stick? Popcorn? What blockhead cooked all this?
Because, like, you're 7 years old, what the hell do you know about food preparation? And if there was nobody to actually cook, you just have to get, like, American cheese and carrots in a bowl and shit. The joke at the end revealing that Snoopy could actually cook actual food and not giving Woodstock some turkey is a fun detail, too. Like Christmas, there is some satire of the American holiday commercialism.
I went down to buy a turkey tree, and all they have are things for Christmas.
For Christmas? Already?
And nostalgia bias aside, though, what the dog doing here is far more creative with its absurd complications that come with something as easy as setting up a table.
Just fast.
One controversy relating to the special that is apparently crime racism subject African Americans. Franklin is seen eating on his own side of the table, separated from the others, that some people have claimed is a detail to mock the outlawing of segregation or just black people in general or whatnot, which is clearly just an exploitation of a coincidence that was noticed 50 years later, that news outlets hyped up for a quick buck. Even though Franklin was added for diversity, Linus and Marcy are also seated individually in the apparent racist shots. Like, you can't possibly call Chuck racist. Man, it's almost like the newspapers lie all the time. The grandma isn't racist, he's allowed to dinner in the end. Why would a racist special have a non-racist grandma? Definitely one of the most memorable of the bunch. In 1974, we'd get another year of two specials, the first being It's a Mystery, Charlie Brown, which refers to about half the plot of the special. Woodstock's nest goes missing in a rainstorm, so it's his and Snoopy's mission to track it down. What the dog doing? Sherlock Holmes edition. Parodying familiar detective stories and plot points with a more childish approach throughout. Parodying familiar detective stories and plot points with a more childlike approach throughout.
You don't make any sense, sir.
Interacting with prominent characters, and it's obviously limited to a spoof, but the actual mystery conflict is not very investing. Maybe if the detective character could speak English, could have allowed for more comedy. A dumb detective rather than an illegible dog one. The other plot involves Sally's school project, which was just Woodstock's misplaced nest. Snoopy and Woodstock unknowingly acquiring it, then just arguing over it. Not really much of a satisfactory cracking of a case. Snoopy agreeing to help with an experiment replacement. It just does nothing subversive with the concept. But also later that year, we got It's the Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown. And that title sounds familiar. It's the holiday figure that exists in the universe, Charlie Brown.
Aren't those shoes almost out of date, Sally? That's why they're on sale. Besides, I like to be different anyway. Oh.
So on top of the Great Pumpkin, Linus also believes in the Easter Beagle.
You said the Easter Beagle was coming. Well, where is he?
I'd never seen this one before, and I figured it could potentially be a rehash of Great Pumpkin. But it's more of an expansion of Linus's mindset, so much of the time is actually dedicated to waiting for the Easter Beagle. But the Easter Beagle, Snoopy, shows up and gives out eggs that he stole from Lucy, and does what's expected. Different, but eliminates any of the childlike realism of the Great Pumpkin, a childhood myth. One of the main plot being Marcy's inability to color eggs correctly, which is just repeating the same joke. There is some light satire of the holiday commercialism, which is always a plus, but doesn't really retain any of the religious references despite also taking place over a Christian holiday. It's just too similar to its predecessor without being a direct rehash, so it's not the best or worst thing in the world.
Tastes terrible, sir.
Rats.
You know what your problem is, Kermit?
I think I have a deep-rooted need for approval aggravated by the fact that I'm kind of short and green.
Nope, that's not it. You just can't draw.
Gosh. Thanks a lot, Piggy.
Wait until you get my bill.
Sheesh.
Oh, good grief, poor Charlie Brown. He's the saddest boy in town. There's no hope. There's no hope. He's away.
The next holiday to knock off the list would be Be My Valentine, Charlie Brown. Linus wants his teacher to be his Valentine, and his disinterest with Sally is continued, as well as continuing Lucy's desire to exploit Schroeder in marriage. And the little red-haired girl is, like, mentioned once, something you'd figured get more focus, because the title suggests a spiritual successor. So multiple pre-existing romantic conflicts are acknowledged, but it's super disorganized, unlike You're in Love, Charlie Brown, which had a consistent romantic objective.
This is for...
Also, seeing Snoopy eat chocolate with zero consequences is a nice visual gag. The rest of the crew feels bad for Charlie Brown for receiving 0 Valentines, so they try to make it up with him, so there's a little mistreatment. The ending is actually good, though. Schroeder suggesting that randomly giving Charlie Brown Valentines won't make anything better.
Where were you yesterday when everyone else was giving out Valentines? Is kindness and thoughtfulness something you can make retroactive? Don't you think he has any feelings?
And that could have come across as a rehash of Charlie Brown's All-Stars, but without a purpose, but here there is a more honest approach. There's love, sure, but not much of a plot. Speaking of All-Stars, You're a Good Sport, Charlie Brown sounds like a rehash of All-Stars, you know, 'cause sports. But it's actually about a bike derby, Charlie Brown failing miserably. It's the typical great race episode like Wacky Races without Dick Dastardly the Dick Man, baby. I never liked that type of episode growing up. Like, I used to watch Johnny Test unironically, and that had a handful of, like, racing competition episodes, and even I hated those episodes then. This one, it really isn't doing anything new, but has some really solid jokes. The joke of Charlie Brown and Snoopy crashing and mistakenly being sent to opposite hospitals is really funny, and it just randomly turning into the tortoise and the hare towards the end of the race.
A gift certificate for 5 haircuts.
Haircuts?
We couldn't get you the Pro Bowl tickets, Charles.
Having Charlie Brown win, but all for nothing, is funny and unique. But the holiday specials were clearly the bread and butter, so next we got It's Arbor Day, Charlie Brown. Yeah, an Arbor Day special. Now, not that I don't care about the environment, but a Arbor Day special? Arbor Day is a holiday that encourages planting and preserving trees, and Sally has to do a report on the holiday. So the crew participates by planting trees and gardening. Oh yeah. Given that it's springtime, the baseball season begins, and the gang plants trees all over the baseball field, the seasonal activities conflicting with one another. So they play baseball in a forest, resolving the conflict, and it's just a small amount of shenanigans, but we've already had a sports special, and what is even supposed to happen in an Arbor Day special? Can you even name another Arbor Day special? I can't.
Okay, Mom, rerun is all set to go.
Does your mother take your little brother with her everywhere?
Uh-huh.
The special also marks the animated debut of Rerun. Rerun Van Pelt is Linus and Lucy's younger brother that was introduced in 1972. Rerun being a derogatory nickname provided by his siblings. His existence being a plot twist for his introduction. His actual name is never revealed, and he sort of actually got more focused towards the end of the comic run. This is also the last Peanuts project to feature the signature music of Vince Gualdry as he passed away on February 6, 1976 from a heart attack. but his impact on the stylistic decisions of the franchise is still widely recognized and is often utilized and designed in the spirit of. But it's Arbor Day, nothing happens, it's pointless, but nowhere near the end of the chronology. So, since the brand was big enough to get an Arbor Day special, implying that it ran out of holidays due to sheer quantity, it got another chance on the big screen. Like I said, it was argued that Snoopy Come Home wasn't viable from studio bankruptcy. This was distributed by Paramount, a big dog company, so no marketing budget issues. Releasing a fat 5 years after Snoopy Come Home, seemingly restoring faith in the theatrical brand. The film Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown is about the gang going to summer camp. Bros Think They Fred 3. Camp, I wanna pee-pee. Even though they already did that plot in It Was a Short Summer. Camp Shenanigans, a rival team of bullies. They lose at games.
I like the chow line.
There's so little unique jokes. It's just doing things that have been done before, and like, it is a really bland direction. Obviously, it's Peanuts. I'm not expecting there to be thrills, but like, nothing happens. Especially nothing to justify a feature-length runtime. It's barely an adventure, no significant character study or development, no experimental sequences, no depression, no Christianity. It's just camp. Given the title, a lot of the plot is spent on an overly long racing competition. The single competition is stretched out to an eternity. The generic bully group of antagonists who are completely forgot about halfway through, not winning. Like, I don't even know what's worse, a boring concept of a summer camp movie or a nothing concept of a rafting competition movie. Fun fact, The Simpsons episode Camp Krusty was originally supposed to be the plot of a Simpsons movie, which didn't happen in their peak of popularity. That is what this movie feels like, The Simpsons Camp Krusty movie that never happened. But that episode is actually good because it comes with the twist of the shithole of a camp being overrun by children in rebellion. The credits is legitimately the best part of the movie. It's the only instances of experimental color choices. It's only an hour and 17 minutes with credits, but it just feels like an eternity. There's like no information on the budgeting, but it made about $3 million, so I don't know if it was a failure or success or not, but it wasn't the last one, so it was probably successful. But back on TV, we got It's Your First Kiss, Charlie Brown, which is sort of a sequel to You're in Love, Charlie Brown, excluding Valentine's Day. One of the main selling points being the reveal of the little red-haired girl, who, believe it or not, is a little girl with red hair. I would have never guessed.
That girl on the float, it's... You mean Heather? Heather? It's the little red-haired girl.
Her actual name, Heather, also being revealed. Heather being the homecoming queen, unknowingly at the expense of Charlie Brown, who was responsible for escorting her. He is also participating in the homecoming football team, so it's sports shenanigans and romance anxiety, and that's it. Two things that have been done better before combined, and the conclusion is revealed in the title, Nothing Happens, It Sucks. But not as nightmarish as What a Nightmare, Charlie Brown. So during a harsh winter, Snoopy eats like 5 pizzas and drinks 3 root beers, and he has a nightmare about being an Alaskan hunting dog. Get it? Snoopy has to be an actual dog instead of a beagle with seemingly no power limits. There's like no goal or anything either. Snoopy Come Home had different scenarios to make a conflict. It's apparently supposed to be a parody of Call of the Wild, an adventure novel written by Jack London, published in 1903, which has had 7 movie adaptations given that it's public domain. And spoiler, I don't know anything about that, but I don't think any child would recognize that, considering it's a What the Dog Doin' special with a clear demographic of children. So I guess the moral of the story is, don't eat 5 pizzas and drink 3 root beers. But that's giving it too much credit. It's completely inaccessible if you don't know the source material, and it's not really a sparing parody adaptation because it's just What the Dog Doin'. Only Charlie Brown and Snoopy appear. There's like 2 cast members throughout. This one being mostly silent, I imagine it was much easier to actually write. Adults' legs are seen. That's how you know it's an imagination. It's just the peak so far of Snoopy Dick Brown plot lines. But at the end of the 70s, we got You're the Greatest, Charlie Brown, and what does that title tell you about the plot? Well, what could this possibly be about? Another sports special. Oh boy, Scooby-Doo Laugh Olympics ass conflict. It's sports training scenes over and over again. Like, I get the characters are children, there's only so much you can do, but why sports again? But kicking off the 80s, we got She's a Good Skate, Charlie Brown, a special focusing on Peppermint Patty and Marcy skating, with Snoopy as the coach. Despite what the title implies, Chuck barely appears. There's a skating competition that thankfully only takes up the last 6 minutes, not stretching the climax to a damn eternity, but it's just a competition plot with extra emphasis on preparation. There's worse Peanuts competition plots. It's unique enough, but there's really nothing glamorous. Also, adult cashier hands. But the second project of the 80s was the fourth Peanuts feature, Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown, and Don't Come Back, Paramount once again distributing the film. The film involves multiple cast members being selected as foreign exchange students to go to Europe. Finally, I can say who was in Paris, going to various European locations without a consistent objective. It's not like they got stuck there, it's just a series of scenes in different countries. It's a new location with some unique things to do, but not much happens. There's variety without cohesion in plot, making it appear as a pointless general lack of a consistent objective. Well, there is one objective. They're trying to meet the foreign exchange student, who we spend like half an hour getting to. But you just kind of forget that because the gang just goes to random places for an eternity. Then they go to school and there's just nothing to justify the feature-length runtime, not really creating any significance from traveling the world. Like, there's one funny scene of Snoopy at the bar being a bipolar alcoholic.
It's been a long, long time. If ever go down Trinidad.
Peppermint Patty likes a French kid instead of Chuck. There's also sort of an antagonist. The owner of the chateau Charlie Brown is staying at. And like, he's not even introduced until like 52 minutes in, bare minimum of a third act conflict.
They are still at the chateau tomorrow. I will have to take steps and do something. I'm going to have to get rid of them in my way.
Mr. Enter never even tells them to leave. It's such a questionable motivation. I guess it's implied that he's willing to try and murder children for trespassing. But there's like a twist with zero foreshadowing that, like, Charlie Brown's grandfather was stationed in France in World War I, which I guess is the first instance of a child's parent being seen, although grandparent. And the chateau catches on fire for some attempt for suspense.
In honor of American guests, we will conduct classes both in English and French. In the morning, it will be in English, and the afternoon class, it will be in French.
Yeah, this is really when they stopped trying to keep the adults anonymous, but not completely. Completely inconsistent for now on. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. I guess it really boils down to convenience of scene execution. Then I'll just go back to the anonymous later. Pretty nothing with an insulting finale. Not as boring as pointless as Race for Your Life, but this did not need to be a movie at all. Later that year in 1980, we got Life is a Circus, Charlie Brown. Because the circus, that's what kids in 1980 give a f*** about. So Snoopy is in love with a poodle and he joins in a circus in a hope to get her attention. Charlie Brown being upset over Snoopy seemingly abandoning him, rehash He's Your Dog, and Snoopy participating in a traveling circus because what the dog doing, the circus edition. This also marks the animated debut of Belle, Snoopy's sister, because it's not a marketable character without a gender swap equivalent. I say sort of because here Snoopy is cross-dressing as her design, first appearing in the comics in 1976. Due to her appearing in merchandise more than the comics, from my understanding, she is often believed to be Snoopy's girlfriend instead of his sister. In fact, there exists Snoopy wedding merchandise where he's getting married to his sister. The merchandise seemingly further increasing this sister misconception. The circus-trained conductor is also visible, as well as a few other employee adults. The child actor Snoopy performs with does nothing interesting and could have been unique from a unique position. But what makes Snoopy decide to leave the circus just being a lame gag resolution? He doesn't want his fur to be dyed pink, so he leaves. No, awful be bad. Ha ha ha! Get down to gloom the little clowns away. 0 out of 10. But the next year we got It's Magic, Charlie Brown. So Snoopy becomes a magician, and half the special is just What the Dog Doing Magic Edition, and the tricks are real, and he turns Charlie Brown invisible, so now he has to figure out how to reverse it. It just being the same lame invisible jokes you've seen 1,000 times.
Yikes! Who's me?
Me, your brother. My dog made me invisible. No one can see me even when I'm here.
We've gotten to the point where the laziness is canonically illogical. Yes, obviously children are more intelligent and Snoopy is anthropomorphic, but if you're just gonna have real magic, you might as well just have talking dogs, two lazy plots tied together. Oh, but the next one, Someday You'll Find Her, Charlie Brown, is even more questionable. So Charlie Brown is watching football and he sees a pretty girl on the TV and he wants to meet her.
Linus, did you see? Linus, I just saw the most beautiful girl in the world.
So Charlie Brown and Linus are like stalkers now. I'm not making this up. I wish I was joking. So they have to go find a random girl, including researching public records, going to houses, stalking others' families, calling strangers, traveling out of the city. Then they find the girl and she likes Linus instead. So the moral of the story is stalk the girl you like and you'll get your way, Fred the movie style. But the next special would be a Charlie Brown celebration, a special consisting of a series of shorts. The opening to the special featuring a rare on-screen appearance of Charles Schulz himself.
Naturally, there will be Snoopy and Woodstock, Charlie Brown, Lucy, Schroeder, Linus, Peppermint Patty, Marcy, the whole Peanuts gang. So, welcome to...
The first short consists of the gang returning to school after summer vacation, sort of like it was a short summer without the camp flashback. The second short is about the winter, and the third is about Lucy failing to get Schroeder's attention, and the fourth is about baseball. Like, there's no title cards or anything, you just have to expect when a new plot begins. Not much of an anthology either, like they don't really connect. It's just random rehashings of things that have already been done with zero explanation, presented as an experimental concept. Like, no wonder they got Charles Schulz to appear at the beginning to explain what the hell this even is. They knew they f***ed up by just doing whatever because they had no movie ideas. The next one actually has potential in a concept that it utilizes. Is This Goodbye, Charlie Brown, featuring the conflict of Linus and Lucy having to move away because of their father's employment, with the emphasis on emotional dissatisfaction, which actually has a consistent, unique conflict that is committed to. Actually having a sense of drama for the first time in a fat minute. Like, obviously it has a fake-out ending, the characters aren't gone or separated permanently, but that's a concept given, so it's not a huge issue. But also in 1983 we got It's an Adventure, Charlie Brown. The CBS bumpers are more well documented. Just a lame short anthology, that's how bad this has gotten. But in 1983, seemingly because of the success of the, quote, experimental series of shorts, and the fact that the specials were basically 22 minutes, meaning we got basically an episode or two of a show a year, the Charlie Brown and Snoopy Show, also known as You're on Nickelodeon Charlie Brown when aired on Nickelodeon, was a series of 1 to 5 minute sketches adapting comics, titled The Charlie Brown and Snoopy Show for marketability, which of course, in comparison to the specials, have done some of the same jokes and concepts. But here, the shorter runtime is a disadvantage. It's also a plus from limiting the expectations of something special because it's a TV special. Feeling more like a show, sure, but it's not a great show either. They're not quite motion comics because of the extension of the animated shorts, but this also bent the rules of presenting adults far more often and featuring rerun more frequently.
Spike, good grief. You're as thin as a promise.
And marking the animated debuts of Snoopy's first siblings. It's watchable, but it underperformed in comparison to the special format, possibly because it was just too short. It probably would have done better in the age of YouTube as short YouTube videos. So even if the show wouldn't last long, the special format would continue, speaking of continuing, because Bon Voyage was so great and not a pointless, boring pile of shit. It needed a TV special sequel. I guess they couldn't get a 5th movie off the ground, so I guess they just thought to further conclude the movie. It's like the first act of taking an asinine attempt to get to a location again, but at least does have some experimentation with utilizing war footage and audio of Dwight Eisenhower.
Beaches, for one purpose only, not to gain anything for ourselves, not to fulfill any ambitions that America had for conquest, but just to preserve freedom, systems of self-government in the world.
So I guess it's a D-Day memorial special because France. It's just a randomly tacked on into follow-up of Bon Voyage, probably just an attempt to score educational brownie points from parents. I respect its attempts to demonstrate the values of valuing military veterans, but the special has no substance. But they didn't even bring all the stupid forced Charlie Brown's grandfather back. despite mentioning the World War duology multiple times. So it even wastes potential of something that doesn't even need to exist. But it did win a Peabody for Distinguishable Achievement in Moratory as Public Service, because of its war history aspects, which are commendable but not really good. But 1984 rolls around, break dancing is all the rage, so obviously we needed a break dancing special. It's Flash Beagle Charlie Brown.
Wait a minute. Drop an old school beat.
The special consists of loose plot points of either unrelated dick around and breakdancing, pandering to the youth of 80s. That's dancing without plot because gnarly, dude. Like it's bad 80s music, not the good kind, mixed with poor youth choir songs. As you can imagine, the songs are awful. How do you do, my fellow kids? It's like that shit make you sing in like 5th grade music class, 80s edition. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Like, at least they made vocal songs, unlike a lot of them after Vince Gualdry's death.
Hold down, kick up your heels, jump up and down, shut your eyes and whirl around.
Snoopy goes to a nightclub and there's adults, which is probably the most famous example of the rules being bent. Awful, dated, beagle shit. But I guess Snoopy was pulling a hella bitch from his flash beagling. Literally bitch. In Snoopy's Getting Married, Charlie Brown, thankfully not to his sister, but to a poodle named Genevieve. When it's not lazy what the dog doing humor, it's preparing for the wedding that doesn't happen because Snoopy's fiancé is a bitchy bitch. Complete waste of time. Peanuts, like a lot of things you wouldn't expect, has had a musical Broadway adaptation. 2 of them, which the team on TV eventually decided to adapt as animated specials, the first of which being You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, which was created by John Gordon. But John Gordon isn't a dude, it's a collective pseudonym like Bon Jovi, referring to the actual soundtrack writer, Clark Genzer, and the soundtrack original cast members. Genzer had begun developing music based on the Schultz characters in the early 60s, but was unable to receive permission from the United Feature Syndicate. He eventually got his demo sent to Schultz, which he surprisingly loved, allowing a professional recording. Genzer himself would voice Linus, the live musical starting in 1967. Joe Raposo would additionally compose incidental music for the show. After the show's run, he would be renowned for his work on Sesame Street and The Great Muppet Caper.
Sing a song, sing out loud.
The show would run for most of 67 and 8. But by 1985, the team was clearly out of ideas and was clearly incapable of writing good songs since Gualdry passed and if Flash Beagle is anything to write home about. The official You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown adaptation would have a 43-minute runtime, longer than any of the other specials at the time, but still overall shorter than the play. Some recordings on YouTube span from 90 minutes to nearly 2 hours. One major change the musical would make is that Snoopy's thoughts could be heard, much like the original Garfield.
It is truly a dog's life. The least Charlie Brown could do is start my day with a little tea and toast.
Not really having a plot, but that's not really a bad thing for once, since it's consistent with its emphasis on a day-to-day journey as it should. Not really overly relying on Snoopy random humor. It's kinda actually like Flash Beagle, but with substance. You could tell the source material is from a different era too, with characters like Schroeder getting more focused than Peppermint Patty, and the little red-haired girl remaining anonymous. Also formatting the songs around running gags like Lucy's desire to exploit Schroeder's career success and Charlie Brown's inability to fly a kite. The show would come back on Broadway from 1998 to 99, and after 2016, it would see a non-Broadway revival, but on TV, we went back to holiday specials, with Happy New Year, Charlie Brown. With Peppermint Patty throwing an epic blowout party, but Charlie Brown wants to do homework and dance with a little red-haired girl and not Patty. And nobody Flash Beagles, thankfully. It's pretty forced for a New Year conflict, which could be a result of any get-together. It does nothing unique, but at least there's no, stalking girls. The ending is actually solid of Charlie Brown overworking himself and falling asleep, missing Heather's appearance.
Your friend, the little red-haired girl. He did what?
He actually learned something. Barely a New Year's special, but fine. But the next special afterward would adapt the second Broadway musical based off Schultz's creation, Snoopy the Musical, which debuted in 1975. And you could tell it came out later because Snoopy is in the title. John Gordon was not involved. These were written by the visions of the playbook writers Warren Lockhart, Arthur Whitelaw, and Michael Grace, the lyricist Hal Hackaday, and the composer Larry Grossman. This one being far easier to get off the ground given that Peanuts had success in the musical department already, further retaining elements of Snoopy's thoughts being audible.
sit up, lie down, roll over, play dead. What I need is a change.
Snoopy is dissatisfied with being treated like an actual dog, taking advantage of Charlie Brown's previous questioning as to why does my dog act this way. Also retaining many of the qualities of the previous, but definitely not as good. But being in line with the identity of the franchise, which is kind of rare at this point. The musical also building musical numbers off of familiar plot points like The Great Pumpkin and Snoopy being a writer. Also sparingly incorporating a live-action stylistic decision and an added sense of imagination that we may need as a musical audience. This is also the first time we see the Van Pelt's mother, not her face, but a parent of one of our child characters is just a rarity in general.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody believed in everybody?
The most recognized song would have to be Just One Person. This is notable because it was a favorite song of Jim Henson's. The song was performed by the Muppets in 1977 during Bernadette Peters' guest appearance on The Muppet Show.
If just one person believes in you, deep enough and strong enough, believes in you.
Which was the first of various Muppet covers even being performed at Jim Henson's funeral.
Making it 3. People you can say believe in me.
So if you recognize Just One Person, just know that it actually originated from Snoopy the Musical. The Muppets performed it on TV first, basically stealing the spotlight of the excellent number. You gotta lower your expectations a little. It's not better than the previous musical, but it works. And in 2013, a third Peanuts musical would be released, titled A Charlie Brown Christmas, being a musical adaptation of the original special. But afterward, we got It's the Girl in the Red Truck, Charlie Brown, which is just bizarre. It's the first attempt at making a animation live-action hybrid about Spike, What the Dog Doin' Yeehaw edition. This came out the same year as Roger Rabbit, 1988, which may have influenced it, but Roger Rabbit didn't create that format, so it could just be a coincidence. But it came out in September of '88, and Roger Rabbit came out in June. So they could have thrown this together in a few months. It's clearly on a shoestring budget. Not enough for the hybrid medium genre. Spike only grabs cartoon objects off screen because him picking up an actual object clearly wasn't in the budget. His microwave Walmart animated pancakes are caught up by an animated tumbleweed. There's nothing to be amazed by. At least there is some attempt at shading consistency. Cough cough reanimated. Spike lives in a live-action desert, and there's no cartoon world, human world separation. And the specials have minor continuity, so that just means that there's just a live-action part of the Peanuts world. But Spike is in love with a girl who drives a red truck. Stupid-ass Spike thinking women should be allowed to drive. The whole special is Spike and some random girl screwing off in the desert in random locations. Random Girl is actually played by Charles Schultz's daughter. Not much of a plot, but I guess we're supposed to care about the romance. Imagine being in 2nd grade and talking about Snoopy, and you say that your favorite character is Random Live-Action Girl. My 2nd grade teacher's name was Mrs. Schultz, and my elementary school then had a bunch of Peanuts crap like Snoopy reading posters. And Mrs. Schultz had to constantly elaborate that she was not related to the guy that made Snoopy because his signature was on everything. Oh, sorry, I'm just distracted because this special is boring and weird and not in a good way. Spike is super emo because girl has a human boyfriend and she doesn't want a doggy style with a doggy. But Spike isn't even like a troublemaker or an asshole. A cartoon dog is there, but there's no comedy. Not a lot of drama is tearing either. Okay, well, there's one roller skating scene that's like the only attempt at a funny dog scene. And the chances that you know what it is, I'm sure it has its defenders on its unique aspects. But on the opposite, Why Charlie Brown Why actually takes risks and doesn't crash and burn unlike the previous. A plot involves a character specifically created for the special, Janice. Janice develops leukemia.
Well, it wasn't just the fever. I have cancer. Cancer?
The idea of this plot suggestion being from a registered nurse at the Stanford Children's Hospital, named Sylvia Cook, making a PSA. The Peanuts cast have been utilized in a small number of PSAs I didn't mention earlier, including Keep the Torch Lit, advertising the campaign of the 1986 restoration of the Statue of Liberty, which was held from 1982 to 1986.
Box 1986, New York, or call 1-800-THE-LADY. It would make me feel a lot better. Say it, gang! Keep the torch lit! Oh, I love her.
A pollution PSA from the American Lung Association, a respiratory health charity.
Now I'm losing games because of pollution. Don't let pollution ruin your game or your lungs.
And multiple PSAs for the American Boy Scouts.
Some skills, climb some hills.
There have also been a handful of educational short films, a little more than quick television PSAs, including Toothbrushing and its sequel, Its Dental Philosophy, Charlie Brown.
And if you don't clean all the plaque off, it can cause decay and gum disease. My dentist and dental hygienist told me all about it, and I floss well every day. I'm going to floss now before I go over to see Schroeder's concert.
As well as Clean the Air, a pollution short film.
I'm depressed about all the polluting and littering.
What do you mean?
In 2021, a series of well-being educational shorts, Take Care with Peanuts, would release on the official franchise's YouTube channel, with over 30 installments continuing to this day, the most recent being about 3 days ago as of writing. The foreshadowing is actually excellent, consisting of progressive injuries that a child may overlook.
Ouch! Now I'll have another bruise. Look, I cut myself last week and the bruises are still there.
Not realizing the physical health deterioration, visiting Janice in the hospital and learning the concepts associated with her disease, being set over the span of multiple seasons of a year, displaying the varying states of her condition and the passing of time, sparingly combining education and drama.
Pretty cute, does it fly? It needs a propeller. Hey, maybe it'll fly without a propeller. Hey, look at this, a baldy.
Especially with the misunderstanding of the contagiousness in the disease, the presence of bullying, and displaying her siblings. I love the incorporation of the hymn farther along. It's a sparing use of a song cover, fitting the themes. It's also the first biblical reference in a fat minute. Getting to this one was a deep memory unlocked. I remember hearing about it on like a top 10 darkest episodes lists from like 2016. I'd never actually seen this one outside of bad clickbait videos. But besides that, I've never really heard anyone bring this up. Probably because cancer is far less marketable than Christmas or Halloween, but it's honestly one of the best.
Is the doctor in? No, I think she's way out.
Snoopy's reunion is both more of a Snoopy backstory and probably the most prominent example of utilizing visible speaking adults.
You're a good horse trader.
Yes, sir, I am a tough bargainer.
Snoopy's puppy farmer being a prominent character. Also bringing back Lila from Snoopy Come Home and showing her mother and more siblings. Also featuring the conflict of Snoopy not being allowed in the apartment, the same one seen in Snoopy Come Home. Although what is not consistent is the establishment of how Charlie Brown was gifted Snoopy at a young age after being bullied, here showing Charlie Brown purchasing him from the farm for only $5. Catching up to the present and showing the consequences of Snoopy separated from his siblings. The conclusion of the puppy farm being torn down is a nice realistic approach, but it doesn't really do anything outside of that, but it's fine. But Snoopy's backstory was already kind of explored. It's not like it was all new. Speaking of all not new, I'm surprised it took us this long, but we got It's Christmas Time Again, Charlie Brown. Okay, well, lots of shows have annual Christmas episodes. It's not the worst idea in the world, but a pretty viable one. And obviously the original is exceptionally important to the chronology. Nothing happens, it's just Charlie Brown shenanigans. Charlie Brown randomly has a new love interest halfway through Peggy Jean. In like the last 8 minutes, there's randomly another Christmas play. There are some religious references and reincorporation of the original score, some satire of capitalism, but the redeeming qualities are only nostalgia based, so it's only a minimally applaudable consistency between specials. I mean, like the title just says it all. Bankrupt Christmas themed nostalgia bait noise. Speaking of noise, you're in the Super Bowl, Charlie Brown, a Super Bowl special. Sports again. It's boring. The most boring sports special yet.
Mr. Franklin Armstrong.
This also reveals Franklin's last name Armstrong, a homage to Rob Armstrong, the creator of Jumpstart, the most successful African-American daily strip comic illustrator.
Melody, here is your new bike and your ticket to the Super Bowl.
The announcer is seen. I guess no adults is even like a rule of thumb anymore. Hopefully no more sports. I wish I was joking. It's sports in spring. They just did 2 of these in a row. Oh, it's sports with flash beagling. That's why it's unique. For the moment, this was the last Peanuts special on primetime television. The viewership had seemingly declined, and the specials would continue just on the direct-to-video market. The first being It Was My Best Birthday Ever, Charlie Brown. Alright, birthday's not a bad concept for a slice-of-life franchise. Kids like birthdays, even if it's not your own. It's less than half an hour, and there's somehow filler. Spoilers, it's just the same Linus-failed romance crap we've seen 1,000 times at this point. There's a scene where Charlie Brown asks Sally how the party was, even though he was there the whole f***ing time. God, this episode. It's just noise, repeating the same shit. The special released in 1997 and would be the last Peanuts special of Charles Schultz's lifetime. Impactful to the specials and movies because he'd worked on all of them that he was alive for. Schultz would pass away on February 12, 2000. The beginning of the new millennium would also mark the end of the comic strip. Unlike a lot of popular strips, it would not be produced posthumously, but would be heavily reprinted. If we were doing something dirty in elementary school, we'd lay newspapers down a lot, and I'd always see the Peanuts comics, so due to his reprints in, second grade, I thought he was still alive. I didn't find out he died until, years later. The final Peanuts comic strip would be a posthumous release announcing Charles Schultz's retirement as a result of failing health, but would unfortunately release one day after his death, stating, "Dear friends, I have been fortunate enough to draw Charlie Brown and his friends for almost 50 years. It has been the fulfillment of my childhood ambition. Unfortunately, I am no longer able to maintain the schedule demanded by a daily comic strip. My family does not wish Peanuts to be continued by anyone else, therefore I am announcing my retirement. I have been grateful over the years for the loyalty of our editors and the wonderful support and love expressed to me by fans of the comic strip. Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Linus, Lucy, how could I ever forget them?" But 7 months after Schultz's passing, the next special, which Schultz had creative supervision over, would be released on home media. It's the Pied Piper Charlie Brown is just a Pied Piper retelling that's not funny. Just your typical public domain spoof, featuring the most adults yet.
Business was done at the edge of town. When the mice all disappeared, we saw the vermin flee. Oh, dear friend, we're not the folks to shrink from the duty of giving you a generous reward.
The ending is actually funny. The government wants Snoopy the Pied Piper to get rid of them damn rodents, but he is not paid in return, so he also gets rid of the actual rodents, the government. Only advantage of it being a modern retelling. I don't know how it performed on home media, but it would regain its TV special slot, seemingly with a curiosity of how would the franchise continue without Charles Schultz. The grand return being another holiday special sequel in 2002, a Charlie Brown Valentine. And that's not even counting the other love interest-oriented plot lines. It's just the same red-haired girl plot again, just repeating the same series running gags, even rehashing the New Year's one. But this wasn't the only awful holiday special rehash of 2002. We also got Charlie Brown's Christmas Tales. Shorts and Christmas rehashing. This concept was conceived specifically to fill a time slot. The original Christmas special runtime with commercials, if you were watching it on TV, would be 35 minutes, which exceeds a standardized time slot. So during reruns, bits and pieces were often cut down, depending where and when you were watching it, but these edits were disliked by fans because of the cultural significance and its street cred. So there was enough to make a TV special about the making of the special. A retrospective documentary hosted by Whoopi Goldberg.
You're about to meet the creators of A Charlie Brown Christmas, as well as the original cast from 37 years ago.
Adding another 18 minutes that allows 12 minutes of commercials within the hour. But for whatever reason, the retrospective would stop airing. Oh no, not Whoopi Goldberg. So to create this gap in content, an 18-minute Christmas special was created, lasting 17.5 minutes technically, which is just a random series of Christmas shorts created to fulfill a runtime. That's it, it sucks even harder. But instead of Christmas again, we got baseball again in Lucy Must Be Traded Charlie Brown. Baseball again! And then another f***ing Christmas special, I Want a Dog for Christmas Charlie Brown, even though we just had 2 of them. Rerun wants a dog, he meets Spike, then he doesn't want a dog, what the dog doing, ho ho ho. But the next special was a pitched idea that Schultz had been developing, so they decided to pick up the pieces from the wreckage. He's a bully, Charlie Brown.
Why should I play you for all the marbles?
This one is also hard to find. The first thing that pops up on Google if you search it is a TV trash review, a Nostalgia Critic clone from back in the day.
And hey, Rerun has a bunch of marbles now himself! Coinky Dink!
Hey, what's with your funny-looking friend?
Seriously, why are there so many people in this universe that don't realize Snoopy's a dog?
Thanks for the reviewer, random Doug Walker fanboy. But afterward we got Happiness is a Warm Blanket, Charlie Brown, another not bad concept focusing on maturity and childhood obsessions. Focusing on Linus's emotional attachment to his blanket and being forced to give it up with the threat of his grandmother snipping it apart. The blanket getting misplaced thanks to Lucy, who was doing him a favor. And what could have been a good opportunity for sole character development really doesn't do anything. Possibly establishing a reason for Linus's emotional attachment to the blanket could have actually added substance to a running gag / design attribute. There's so little cause and effect for the story, and it's not an emotional conclusion. Also featuring gags that have been done 1,000 times, a disadvantage for YouTubers that watch all of them. Ending with Linus continuing his obsession as is. Never gives us context as to Linus's insecurities. For a 44-minute special, there's not a lot done. Wasted potential with its simplicity. But it is sort of a series finale to the original specials, keyword original, because something bigger was brewing backstage. A soft reboot feature film interpretation of the series. A creative direction that was conceived by Charles Schultz's son, Craig Schultz, and his grandson, Brian Schultz, as early as 2006. The project went nowhere until 2012, with the help of 21st Century Fox subsidiary, Blue Sky Studios. A now defunct company that if you don't recognize, you're not old enough to be watching my videos. Blue Sky had a bad rep for years, to the point where Disney had fully completed its acquisition of 20th Century Fox in 2021. It was officially shut down, seemingly because it was fiscally unstable as a result of COVID. But now that it's defunct, its reputation is a bit cleaner, seemingly influenced by nostalgia bias. It was arguably overhated, but its reputation had absolutely declined over the course of the 2010s. Now, there's a handful of the catalog I haven't seen or haven't seen in over a decade, but as a YouTuber, I think it's safe to say that the catalog wasn't great overall. Take that with a grain of salt. Maybe I'll make an educated statement on that one day. There are two exceptions, the Peanuts movie and Momoa, which was picked up by not another Disney subsidiary, but Annapurna Pictures, and was distributed by Netflix. However, Disney did utilize their ownage of Ice Age. But Blue Sky's The Peanuts movie is arguably a diamond in the rough. It's an enjoyable film and an effortful justice, but it could be better. The story involving expanding on the little red-haired girl plot, but there's familiarity, but it does enough to be different that it doesn't appear as repetitive in its familiarity. Well, at least some of it. There is some of that what the dog doing filler, which looks nice, but it is filler. The animation easily being its strongest redeeming quality. It's the right level 2.5D, 3D animation formatted like 2D animation. This film is arguably influential to CG adaptations of 2D characters, including the Captain Underpants' first epic movie, The Big Nate Show, The Fairly Odd Parents' New Wish, the CG SpongeBob movies, and the Big Dog Spider-Verse series. There was a clear rule of thumb about what angles the characters should be shown from to prevent lots of awkward angles that the characters weren't clearly designed for. Something that happens when translating 2D to 3D if not cleverly thought out. The facial expressions being mostly thin and flat is a great touch too. Digital 2D animation for effects and visual gags is also incorporated, which is a polished and stylistic touch that enhances the moving comic illusion. The lighting is also super precise, benefiting the overall atmosphere. The only disadvantage being the use of like 2015 pop music on a few instances, which is not only atmospherically inconsistent but also fairly dated. But we're still watching a 2010s Blue Sky movie at the end of the day. What can you expect? The animation is the only super ambitious element, and it wastes zero potential. Thankfully, it's not riddled with pointless celebrities in the cast. Thankfully, Drake doesn't play Pigpen, considering he was in Ice Age 4. I remember when it came out, people were complaining that they showed the little red-haired girl's face, despite her design and name being revealed a long time ago. The perks of being a YouTuber. Not a masterpiece, but a much better direction. But as I said, Blue Sky shut down, so they weren't involved with the franchise adaptations afterward. But in 2018, Apple would acquire a leasing deal from ABC to stream new content featuring the IP, streaming on Apple TV+. This would legally prevent the specials from being reran on television, which does break a holiday tradition. Was probably for the best, because if you're still paying for cable in 2018, then you probably have Snoopy Thanksgiving on VHS. One of the main plans of this Apple deal was to revive the classic special format that hadn't been active since 2010. Apple began making What the Dog Doin' shorts with Snoopy, but that's not the end of the world since the franchise hadn't been broken down to only Snoopy shenanigans, so I can excuse it. Especially when it's separated, it's so much easier just to skip. The first proper special being 2021's Snoopy Presents for Oddlog Sing. Snoopy refers to the Apple franchise. A New Year's special set over the course of December. The special's title referencing that one New Year song? You know the one, that's its actual name.
I'm with my two lovely ladies. Girls, what's your resolution for 2013?
Just get rid of all my haters.
All your haters? Can I ask you something? Do you like white boys?
Lucy doubting her self-worth as a result of her grandmother's Christmas scheduling conflicts, attempting to restore her self-esteem over the course of the rest of December, adding more depth with a conflict of self-reflection. In the end, Lucy realizing the consequences of perfectionism, the same thing that created the disastrous New Year celebration. The animation being a good 2D modern update that's not quite the Peanuts movie, but if you look at some of the 2000 specials, they have like a really gross-looking PBS Kids VHS vibe. This art style is an excellent modernization, excellent lighting, use of motion blurs, color palette, and movements. The movements are still slightly three-dimensional, so it's still a good flat. This is also when background kids started appearing more consistently. Much better than the previous New Year special despite its simplicity and similarities. The next year in 2022, 3 specials would release, the first being It's the Small Things, Charlie Brown, featuring Sally admiring a flower on the baseball field and taking a desperate measure to prevent it from being destroyed. Disturbing preparation for the upcoming baseball season. There is baseball again, but thankfully it doesn't allow sports to overthrow substance, with others eventually beginning to admire the flower over baseball. The dandelion in the field causing disagreement. It's fine. Next, continuing with To Mom and Dad with Love, the first Mother's or Father's Day special, considering that they're never shown. This focusing on Peppermint Patty's insecurities of being raised without a mother, adding a layer of depth to her more tomboyish nature. But thanks to the help of Marcy taking the opportunity to appreciate the day without appropriate qualifications, focusing on morals rather than family roles, making an interesting conflict out of an anonymous character by showing the impact of the daughter, proving that exploring insecurities is still one of the strongest franchise reoccurring redeeming qualities. In addition to showing others preparation for the holiday, a great example of kids still acting like kids. One of the best of all, despite even not acknowledging Rerun. Yeah, what the hell happened to him? The final special of 2022 being Lucy's School. A new school is built, making Lucy concerned over possible differences, sort of like entering high or middle school, but obviously the characters don't age. Lucy forming her own school amongst her classmates, Lucy's school being ineffective from her inability to explain concepts and her students' inability to successfully question authority. Lucy outright fearing the content of professional education throughout, exploring her anxiety over the new school, as she attempts to create a more professional learning environment, creating more work than just complying to already provided education, eventually realizing that there's nothing that she can do, the importance of education, and that she's no professional. The character development is precisely packaged, allowing a lot to be done for a simple concept, another one of the best. But afterward, the specials would begin focusing on other characters, a format which had been done before, but isn't a bad direction to be subversive. It surprisingly created what may seem like random spin-offs that justify their existence. I feel like lots of mass franchises often conceive awful spin-offs for marketability, but this isn't the case. The first being one-of-a-kind Marcy. Marcy and Peppermint Patty, as stated, got focused specials together, but never Marcy by herself, while feeling that she's only good at resolving others' conflicts rather than solving her own, disliking being Patty and others' assistant in nothing else, holding similarities to You're Not Elected Charlie Brown with a much better emphasis on general well-being improvement rather than satirizing slice-of-life situations. Marcy is forced into the role of presidency, a position she initially refuses out of insecurity, resigning in the end. Also featuring golf but sports with more drama than comedy, avoiding the no-substance sports conflicts throughout the chronology. Does something new with its concept, and its execution dodges a repetitive nature it easily could have fallen into. The next spin-off of sorts being Welcome Home Franklin. Franklin is a character with a similar franchise state to Marcy. This expanding on Franklin's personal life, his father being in the military and forced to relocate constantly, showing a canonical explanation as to how he met the rest of the cast. Also sort of explains his absence towards the beginning of the chronology, befriending fellow loser Charlie Brown. Also being similar to You're a Good Sport Charlie Brown with a racing conflict, but actually has a narrative purpose behind the competition. Again, not too much sports, and that's a good thing. Even bringing back the myth of the Great Pumpkin in a way that doesn't feel nostalgia bait pandering, and acknowledging all the clickbait bullshit about the Thanksgiving special somehow being racist by seeing Franklin sit on the same side as the table as others. Even holding a sparing use of licensed music with John Coltrane and Chuck Berry, the James Brown and Neil Armstrong parallels also being clever too. Any spin-off that's not creatively bankrupt garbage is worth an applause in my eyes, and this is another one of the best specials. In October 2023, Concept art would leak suggesting that Blue Sky planned a Peanuts movie sequel that didn't get picked up. But in the next month, November 2023, on the 8-year anniversary of the Peanuts movie, a sequel was officially announced. With not many details yet, making this the third Blue Sky movie without Blue Sky. We have one screen cap so far, and I'm for it, even if the movie wasn't perfect. So, even if Peanuts did dive into Inconsistency, I think it's safe to say that it's in a better place than most other immortal franchises. You figured a big greedy company like Apple would be a death sentence, but they've actually brought some new light into the franchise without the creator, Blue Sky, as well. Yes, there's still plenty of What the Dog Doing to go around, which I'm not the hugest fan of, but it's like a mile above anything Disney owns.